Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk to you about Rachel, the wife of Jacob. Now, before I begin with Rachel, I just kind of want to go into a little bit of the lineage. Um, Sarah and Abraham were married, and they had a son called Isaac. But also, Abraham had a son Ishmael with a lady Hagar, with the maid servant, I guess she would be called. Now, from Isaac, Isaac marries Rebecca. Rebecca gets pregnant. She has twins, Esau and Jacob. Rebecca and Jacob, they get together and they contrive to basically rob Esau of his birthright. They trick Isaac because at that time Isaac was blind. But but I don't want to go too much in that story because that's just backdrop. But please read that story because it is so interesting. It is very interesting. It's a very interesting story. So, because she and he had gotten together and stolen the birthright of Esau, Esau was angered. So, Rebecca decided that she would send Jacob away to get away from the wrath of his brother. To get, as some people might say, his just desserts, because what he had done and what she had done was wrong. And so she sends him to her brother Laban's house. Now Laban had sons and daughters. He had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. When Jacob saw Rachel, it is written that Rachel was fair. He, I guess one would say, fell in love with her. I don't know if it was immediately, but he found her attractive at first sight. And so he said to Laban, I would like to take her for a wife. And Laban said, well, you're going to have to work for me for 7 years before you can marry her. Now, let me say this. Let us remember this adage. You reap what you sow. Or as some of us will say, what goes around comes around. So he works for Laban for 7 years, and when it's time for him to receive his wife, she is brought to him under the cover of darkness to his tent. And they didn't have what we have now, nor candle, nor light switches. So he was operating on the same blind faith that his daddy operated on. Except his daddy was a little more perceptive. When his daddy was tricked, he was kind of keen to the fact that something wasn't right because he felt the hair, but he recognized the voice. But you go back and read that story. So, Leah is taken into the tent. Now, let's talk about Leah for a moment. It is said that Rachel was fair, but Leah had a tender eye. Now, I looked up tender eye and I got different, I got varying definitions of what tender eye could mean, but most of them alluded to the facial features of Leah. It didn't talk about the other physical attributes of her, only the facial. But obviously, Rachel was well put together from head to toe. And I'm taking license with that. But she was fair to look upon. So, on the next morning, he discovers that it wasn't Rachel who was in his room, in his tent that night. It was actually Leah. So he felt that he had been tricked, and he was. And so he said something to Laban, and Laban said, hold on, it's not customary for the younger daughter to marry before the older. And I guess one would think, well, shouldn't he have told him at the beginning? And someone else would say, well, shouldn't he have known? Maybe he should have done his research, okay, or asked some questions. But nevertheless, he let Laban know that Rachel was his desired daughter. And so he told him, work for me 7 more years and you can have Rachel. So in essence, Jacob worked 14 years to get the woman that he wanted, which I would have to say, he really loved her. He really loved her. Now, let's talk about the relationship. Once they were in the marriage, he had two wives. Leah the first, but not preferred. Rachel the second, she is preferred. And it is obvious because the word says that Leah recognized that she was not the favorite. And God saw that. He knew that. And guess what? He closed up Rebekah's womb and opened Leah's. Leah had 4 sons by Jacob, and around that time Rachel was getting jealous. So what Rachel decided to do, well, since you've had 4 sons by my husband, I'm going to get my maidservant to have a child for me. And so that is what is done. And her maidservant's name was Bilhah, or some might pronounce it Bilhah. And so she had Dan, and then she had Naphtali. Well, when Leah saw that Rachel was having her maidservant have babies for her, I guess Leah said, I can do that too. So Leah's maidservant, Zilpah, she has Gad and Asher. Now, here is what I would call a current day question for an old time dilemma. Who today would get so jealous of their partner having a baby with someone that they would contract with someone else to have a baby with their partner to make the other woman jealous? Now, I'm not going to stand in judgment of that because those were the times. But in my modern day mind, I'm thinking she added insult to injury. Now you got 2 women of whom you should be jealous. But it was her maidservant, so I guess she was well with that. And in those times, that was done. It was customary, I guess, for that to be done. And so there was no shame on that. But what to me was, what might go into the shame realm was the jealousy.
And I can see that because, we see these, I always like to bring it to present as well. And we see these television shows like Sister Wives, and we see these reality TV shows, and we see this in real life too, where we see this person's with this person, but they're with that person. So we see that kind of stuff, and it just makes you think, wow, they did the stories, and you dig deeper in the Bible, you see we kind of repeat history sometimes, don't we?
Yes, we do. And this plays out like biblical reality. Mm-hmm. Now, let's get back to Leah and her children. Now, we know that there are 12 tribes of Israel. Mm-hmm. Leah was not the preferred. But yet, of the 12 tribes, 6 of them belonged to her children.
Wow.
Rachel, who was the preferred, only 2 of her children are part of the 12. Now that does not diminish their value,
right,
to God's plan. But it shows that sometimes, here's my takeaway. If you are a Leah in life, mm-hmm. you are not the preferred one. Mm-hmm. There is someone who people would rather have in a position other than you. It doesn't have to be a marriage. It can be a job. It can be within an organization. You are not the preferred one. You just keep the faith and pray, and the Lord will prepare a table before you, because not only was she able to have children, but she had boys. Mm-hmm. That was like gold.
That's gold. That was gold, yes.
She had 7 children. Her last one was a girl. Now, of all of the children, Jacob only had 1 daughter. 13 children, 1 daughter. And her name was Dinah. So, not only did the Lord bless her with her womb being open, he blessed her that her sons would have a significant percentage of the tribes of Israel. And I just found that to be interesting.
True.
However, Leah's son, Joseph, who was her firstborn, Joseph, after his brothers became jealous of him, Leah's boys.
Leah's boys.
So dysfunction again in the family, because Joseph was a dreamer.
Was he the dreamer that that went down and they dumped him in a hole and all that?
Yes, Joseph was a dreamer, and you can imagine it. You're in the midst of a dreamer, and this dreamer has dreams that really don't cast any favor upon you.
Right.
You might feel a certain kind of way.
Yes.
And this was the case, and so they decided they really wanted to kill him.
Yes.
But they ended up selling him into slavery, and many times people say, "But God," and that's a "but God."
That's a "but God." That sure is.
The Lord intervened, and even though they thought they had done, a disservice to him, they put him in a place to be blessed.
Yes.
Because the king needed somebody who could interpret some dreams correctly.
That's right.
And so he found favor with the king. And due to his favor with the king, I'm not going to tell all the story, but he was able to bring his family to Egypt and get away from the famine. So her son was instrumental in saving his people. But after he dies and years pass and people forget about the relationship he had with the king, those same children of Israel that were brought to Egypt, away from the family, ended up in slavery.
Yes, they did. Yep.
But that does not diminish his contribution in what he had to offer.
Yep.
And then Benjamin was the baby.
Yep.
Benjamin was the baby. And it was when the brothers, when he saw Benjamin, that, I think Benjamin is what softened his heart, and he wanted to kind of bless, for the sake of Benjamin. Because think about it, Benjamin, when he left, Benjamin was the only step left in that. Well, I won't say he was the only step because the maid servants,
right.
but of the true wives, he was the only one. His whole brother was gone.
Right.
Everybody else was a half.
Right.
He was there dealing with brothers who were considered whole.
Yeah.
By today's terms.
Wow.
I don't know if they looked at it that way, but I'm kind of thinking they did, because there was there was division.
That causes division when you have
and
half
so
steps and holes.
They may not have used those words,
Right.
but there was division. There was division. And so, as we talk about Rachel and talk about Leah, we talk about their children, we talk about favor, and we talk about how people are treated. And those are the things we want to realize. Just because it appears that you're on the bottom and you're not preferred does not mean God won't bring you to the top. And just because you're on the top and you make a mistake and God punishes you does not mean he will not bring you back if you are repentant. Because although Leah, probably she and her husband, she and Jacob made Leah feel badly about not being a preferred one, and that was wrong, and she was punished for that because her womb was shut up. But in essence, the Lord kind of built her back, or kind of, I guess showed her some favor.
Favor, that's the word, favor.
And allowing her to give birth to the son that would bring the people into Egypt. And now it's going to take Moses to get them out of there. But still, he saved his people from famine.
Yes.
He saved them from death. They went into slavery, but he saved them from death. Okay?
Wow.
Now, with that jealousy in that family, one would think that those sisters were always at odds, but they were not. Because when Laban was serving, when Jacob was serving Laban, tending his flock, there was some strife that developed between him and Laban's sons, which are his wives' brothers. Right. And so he wanted to leave out, and now don't hold me to the exact descriptions here, but he asked, could he have some of the livestock? And so he described the kind he wanted. You know, if they give birth and they look like this, then I'll take all of those. And I want to imagine that he was asking for the rare looks that will come. You know, normally it doesn't happen like that. But if you have a speckled one or whatever, I'll take it. Right. You know, just in humility. It's like I'll take whatever I can get.
Right.
But God looked like everything that was born after that fit the description.
Yep.
So you know that made Laban and his sons feel a certain kind of way. So there was that friction there. And so Jacob decided, need to get out of here. Need to get my wives.
Yep.
And my children, and we need to go. And so they did not let Laban know. They had to sneak away. And those sisters got together on that.
Yeah.
That's when they were together. They were not in division on that. They set whatever differences they had, they set them aside for the common good. They were loyal to their husband.
Yes.
And I thought about that. I said, you know, sometimes even in families, like I'll use myself, my brother and I, when we were growing up, my brother and I could fight each other all day, but if you mess with him, we will put our argument on hold to take care of you.
That's exactly right.
And so these ladies put whatever differences they had on hold in support of their husband. Now, when they were leaving, Miss Rachel decided that she would take one of the idols that her father had. Now, it wasn't until that was mentioned that I realized, oh, Laban wasn't as spiritually inclined, not toward the Lord, as one would have thought, because he had the idols. And so, of course, they came after Laban. They came after him. You know, they wanted to pursue them, and he accused them of stealing from him. And Jacob said, "I stole anything from you?" He said, "I tell you what. If you find anything on anybody, they'll die." Not knowing that Miss Rachel had stolen something. And so Laban goes into her tent and she pleads with him. You know, she apologizes and she pleads. But although she apologizes and pleads, she does later die. Because that was, her husband had given his word in the presence of the Lord. Right. So it had to come to fruition.
What happened?
And so, although some might say, well, Rachel was the greatest. I don't want to say one was greater than the other. I'll say Rachel was preferred at that time. Preferred. But Leah wasn't the one that was, when she was gathering things, it's not written that she thought to grab an idol. And so, okay, here's the takeaway. Again, with the takeaway. Sometimes on our Christian journey, because I don't want it to make this one incident make it seem like Rachel was the worst.
The worst, yeah.
Yes, nor Laban. That's just one incident that's mentioned. And you can play, like Floyd Gully would say, you don't want to get in the weeds with that. Right. But to me, what it says, that sometimes as Christians, we will get off the path.
Yes.
And do some ungodly things. But that does not mean that we don't come back and get ourselves on the right pathway. And so I don't want it to seem like I'm casting a shadow on her, because I have no heaven or hell to put anyone.
Thank you.
You know, but when I entered into studying about this, I was thinking I was about to read about this glorious story about Rachel, this triumphant story. And in some ways, I think Leah has a more triumphant story. She was not preferred. She provided 6 of the tribes of Israel. She had the first sons. Now, here's one other thing I want to mention. Judah. Not only was Leah the mother of 6 of the boys, but her 4th son, Judah, is the one from whom Jesus is He comes out of Judah. Okay, so it is said that Mary, the mother of Jesus, her father was from the tribe of Judah. And the way you did it, whatever the tribe was of the father, so was the tribe of the child.
Right.
So that meant she was from the child of Judah. I think her mother might have been a Levite. But anyway, her father was from the tribe of Judah. Joseph also was from the tribe of Judah.
Yes.
Hail, hail, the tribe of Judah. And so not only was Leah blessed in that she had 6 sons, 7 children with 6 sons, but one of her sons,
Yes.
that 4th son, was from whom Jesus came through his lineage.
Yeah.
Now that to me
It's powerful.
is powerful. Yes. You know, that's what I'm saying. You know, sometimes when you think you are not the chosen one, fear not. For God has the last word. And so if there's anybody out there, whether it's a job situation or a family situation, or you're in school, or any organization or any walk of life in your social groups, do not be upset if it appears that you are not the favored one or the favorite one.
Wow.
Because if you serve the Lord with gladness, you keep the faith, you keep your eye focused on the pathway of Jesus Christ, and the person who matters the most will favor you.
That's true.
And it will surpass any earthly favor that man can give to a person.
Wow.
And so because all of us at some point in our lives probably has felt that we were not the favorite one, especially in jobs. You can be on a job and you have all the knowledge and the skills and the degree, and a position becomes open. You know this. As a matter of fact, you've been doing that job, but you didn't have the position. But when it comes open, you apply, and the boss man said, "No, I'm going to give this to William over here because William has been with me for 40 years, and I just can't do William. Like, you're not the preferred one." And you might even have to stand by and help William, assist William. But faint not and fear not. Stay rooted and grounded in the word.
That's it.
Seek the Lord. Stay faithful. And don't even let Satan plant any evil in your mind. You just stick with the Lord.
That's
and
it.
he will bring you out. He will lift you up. He will prepare that table before you in the presence of those who have established themselves as enemies.
That's exactly right. You know, I brought, we that being the preferred one, we to bring it in like to people that we know of, we hear stories about presidential families. We hear stories about the Bush family. We know that George Bush and then his son George was president. But George Walker was not really the one his daddy wanted to follow in his footsteps. It was actually his son Jeb.
Jeb was a smart one.
There you go. We see that in so many different things.
But Jeb was not as aggressive
Right.
as George.
That's exactly right.
George reminded me of that kid in the classroom who would raise his hand real quick but didn't have a clue what the
That's right.
answer was.
But Jeb knew the answer and was waiting to be called on.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. And so whenever I read the Bible or read a story in the Bible, I always ask myself, what am I supposed to get from this?
Yes.
These stories are not to be read for my entertainment,
No,
although
no.
they can be quite interesting
Yes,
and
ma'am, they
entertaining.
can be.
But there is something that is to be said or to be taken away. And my takeaways are these. If you get in a position where you are favored, don't look down on someone else. Because that which is given to you can be closed up.
Yes, it can be.
If you are not the favored one, you just keep the faith.
Keep the faith. Keep the faith.
Do what you're supposed to do. And God will bring you out. He will lift you up. You don't have to wait for man to exalt you. The Lord will exalt you. Now, I have to keep my Sunday school teacher's voice in my head. But there was a moment when I thought about Rachel and her heart was broken, yes, her womb was closed up because she made her sister feel bad, but it hurt not only that your womb was closed, but every time your sister gave birth, that was validation that she might have been preferred, but she wasn't denied.
That's exactly right. That's
exactly right. Because, and that had to hurt because on a level that showed that, okay, so Jacob didn't think she was the prettiest one. She wasn't his first choice. But there was something about it. She wasn't one that he just turned away and said, I'll go 7 years before I have any involvement with you.
I think we forget that part right there.
Yeah.
We forget that part right there.
That's right. Like some people say, you don't throw away a Cadillac just because it's got a dent in it. You know, Leah had a purpose. Mm-hmm. And we can see that in the children that she had. Mm-hmm. You know, and somebody said, well, her children weren't that good because they just got blah, 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 blah. But just go back and read some more. Mm-hmm. Because when I tell you about Judah, when I think about Judah, yeah, you know, just if you want to set the other 5 to the boys to the side,
about Judah,
just think that
and go back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, as I end, I want people to be reminded that no matter what your circumstance, whether you are top or whether you are bottom, you've got to stay focused. You've got to continuously keep the faith and serve the Lord. Stay in prayer. Ask for guidance so that you will stay on the right pathway, because you know the verse that says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is something we tend to forget. And that was something that was missing. They were doing unto each other as they thought was done unto them. Because when Rachel gets her maid servant to have a baby, Leah did. And there were 4 children out of that. Each one of those maid servants had 4 children. But I'm not going. Maybe that was the divine person's a purpose of the Lord. That was divine. You know, a lot of people who like to study the numbers and deal with numbers 12 and I'm not into that, but I'm sure there's somebody that that was a person that those 4 were needed because they needed that to get that 12. That's all well and good. But what I can say, nothing was done that was not ordained by the Lord, whether it was his divine will or his permissive will. It still was within his will, because if it were not, it wouldn't have occurred.
Yep.
That's right.
That's right. Miss Betty, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. That just sitting here and talking about, I won't say characters, that I'll use that word from the Bible. It really opens up how we live today and lets us know that we repeat history.
We do.
And we can learn from that. And, you know, reading the Bible is not just, like you said, we just don't read just to read it to get the entertainment, but to actually apply it to things that are happening today in our lives. And we see in this story about Rachel and her sister, about Leah, and Leah not being the preferred sister, but having Judah, number 4, then that lineage that leads to Jesus. That's huge right there. And that's why I like going back, and I'll try to trace back a person and where they came from just to see that lineage. You know, we like to see our lineage as well. We like to go on Ancestry.com to see, well, wow, and that person over there is a track star. Well, you know, that's my cousin. And, you know, we like to, you know, go back in our own lineage and see things that we like to see. We don't know how it all happened, but it did. So this tells me the same thing right here. Tells me the same thing right here.
One last point I did not make, and it was on that Judah and Leah, that significance of Judah. When you get to Matthew, the book of Matthew chapter 1, when it opens up, it says, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it gets into your begats. It said, Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Judah. Did not name Reuben and all the others that were born before him Judah. Why? Because that is from the lineage which Jesus came. And I found that very interesting, that Judah, he made the list.
He made the list.
He made the list.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. It's just neat to have these type of conversations. It's really easy to talk about them when you just sit here and talk about them and just think about, like I said, thinking about lineage and what it really means, and all the, you have all the friction around it, all the stuff that happens around it, but it's all for a purpose.
Yes.
It's all for a purpose. It's all for a purpose. So I'm going to close in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. Lord, just thank you for the opportunity to sit here and just talk about your lineage and talk about the people of the Bible. Talk about Ruth. Talk about all these other ladies of the Bible. Talk about Rachel tonight. Talk about Leah. Talk about Mary, the mother of Jesus. We got others we're going to talk about. But this is such rich and wonderful history, and we're just glad that we're able to share with others. Lord, we'd just like to thank you for this day, and thank you for Miss Betty for what she did today. It was a blessing on all of us. Lord, we'd just like to thank you for your darling son who died for all of our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.